What if I told you that a country completely destroyed by war, with its cities burned to ash, its people starving, and its economy worth less than nothing, became the world's second largest economy in just 20 years? Sounds impossible, right? But that's exactly what Japan did. And the strategies they used? They're being copied by countries right now, including China. Some are even being used by Western governments as we speak. This is the monetary archaeologist, where money, power, and history collide. And today, we're diving into one of the most extraordinary economic transformations in human history. Because here's the thing, what Japan pulled off wasn't luck, it wasn't a miracle. It was an engineered revolution that changed everything we thought we knew about capitalism. So buckle up, this story is wild. Let's set the scene. It's 1945. Japan has just surrendered. And when I say Japan was destroyed, I mean destroyed. Imagine this, Hiroshima and Nagasaki are radioactive wastelands. Tokyo is nothing but rubble and twisted steel. Over 40% of all urban areas are completely flattened, gone, erased. Half of Japan's entire merchant fleet sitting at the bottom of the ocean. Industrial production, it had collapsed to less than 10% of what it was before the war. Let me say that again, 10%. Millions of people were homeless. Thousands were literally starving in the streets. The Japanese yen was basically worthless because inflation was out of control. For the first time in over 1,000 years, Japan had no real emperor in power, no army, no identity except defeat. They didn't just lose a war, they lost everything that made them believe they were unstoppable. And here's the kicker. Within just one generation, this same broken nation would completely dominate global trade. Japanese cars would outlast anything America could build. Their electronics would be smarter than anything Europe produced. Companies like Sony, Toyota, and Panasonic would become worldwide symbols of quality and precision. The world called it an economic miracle. But it wasn't a miracle at all. So what actually happened? How did Japan go from total destruction to economic powerhouse? Well, it starts with an American general named Douglas MacArthur. When MacArthur and the Allied forces rolled into Japan, their mission was crystal clear: neutralize Japan, make sure it could never wage war again. The plan was simple: destroy the war machine. And I don't just mean tanks and planes, I mean the economic war machine. You see, before the war, Japan was controlled by these massive industrial empires called zaibatsu. Think Mitsubishi, Mitsui, Sumitomo. These weren't just companies, they were practically nations within a nation. They controlled everything. MacArthur's orders? Break them up, liquidate their assets, destroy their political power. At the same time, the occupation forces launched one of the most radical wealth redistributions in modern history. They seized massive estates from wealthy landlords and gave the land to millions of poor tenant farmers. This wasn't charity, this was punishment. Japan was being dismantled piece by piece. But then, something changed. The Cold War was heating up. The Soviet Union was spreading across Asia like wildfire. In 1949, Mao Zedong's communist revolution took over China. Suddenly, half of Asia was turning red. And American politicians looked at Japan and had a terrifying thought. What if Japan goes communist too? A weak, broken Japan wasn't justice anymore. It was a liability, a security threat. So Washington completely changed strategy, almost overnight. Instead of punishing Japan, America decided to rebuild it, not as a military power, but as a capitalist fortress, a shining example of what democracy and free markets could achieve. Japan would become America's greatest success story in Asia. But here's what's fascinating. The way Japan rebuilt itself was nothing like American capitalism, not even close. Instead of chaotic free markets where everyone competes, Japan created what economists call a guided economy. The government wouldn't control production directly, but it would absolutely direct where everything went. And the engine behind this strategy was a brand new government agency called MITI, the Ministry of International Trade and Industry. Now, MITI wasn't run by politicians making speeches and kissing babies. It was run by technocrats, economists, engineers, strategic planners. These people treated capitalism like a chess game. They studied which industries could make Japan globally competitive, and then they poured resources into those sectors. Steel? Funded. Shipbuilding? Funded. Automobiles? Funded. Electronics? Funded. The government protected these industries with tariffs so foreign companies couldn't crush them. They gave subsidies. They controlled credit from the Bank of Japan. Every single yen that got invested had a specific purpose. Nothing was random. Nothing was left to chance. But here's where it gets really interesting. Japan took the old Zaibatsu empires and reorganized them into something new called Keiretsu.
Think of Keiretsu as business families, networks of companies all linked together through shared ownership and long-term cooperation. At the center of each Keiretsu was a bank. That bank provided steady financing and coordinated strategy for all the companies in the family. Mitsubishi had its family, Sumitomo had its family, Toyota had its family. These companies weren't really competing in the Western sense. They were cooperating. They were ecosystems. They were loyal to each other. And here's the genius of it. While American companies were obsessed with quarterly profits and stock prices, Japanese Keiretsu thought in decades. They reinvested profits instead of paying them out. Their banks gave them long-term credit instead of demanding quick returns. This created incredible stability. Companies could take risks. They could invest in research. They could focus on perfection instead of profit. But the real revolution wasn't happening in boardrooms. It was happening on the factory floor. Japan created a completely new relationship between companies and workers. Lifetime employment, seniority-based pay, collective loyalty. When you joined a company in Japan, you didn't just get a job. You joined a family. You belonged. And in return, the company treated you as a long-term asset, not disposable labor. Workers weren't worried about getting fired next quarter. They could focus entirely on one thing: improvement. This is where the concept of Kaizen comes in: continuous improvement. The idea is beautifully simple. Every process can be refined. Every defect can be eliminated. Every second can be saved. This obsession with perfection turned Japanese manufacturing into the envy of the entire world. Think about it. While American factories were churning out products as fast as possible, Japanese factories were obsessing over quality. Every detail mattered. Every product had to be perfect. By the 1960s, Japan's exports were surging. Steel, textiles, electronics, cars. They started flooding global markets. And the quality? Undeniable. The prices? Unbeatable. American car companies laughed at Japanese cars at first. Tiny little things. Cheap. Surely they couldn't compete with Detroit's muscle. But Japanese cars didn't break down. They were reliable. They were fuel efficient. And they cost less. Same thing with electronics. Sony, Panasonic, Toshiba. These names became synonymous with innovation and quality. By 1968, listen to this, Japan had overtaken West Germany to become the world's second largest economy. Let me put that in perspective. In just 23 years, Japan went from literal starvation to the #2 economy on planet Earth. That's not a miracle. That's coordination on a level most countries can't even imagine. The state guided, banks financed, companies produced, workers perfected. The whole nation moved like a single, unstoppable machine. Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds amazing. Why doesn't every country do this? Well, because behind the miracle was control. Quiet, relentless control. MITI decided who could import and who could export, who could borrow money and who couldn't. The Bank of Japan printed money when the government wanted growth and tightened it when they were worried about inflation. Big corporations were favored. Small businesses survived on scraps. There was inequality. There was pressure. The famous Japanese work culture, the exhaustion, the stress, the sacrifice, that all came from this system. But here's the thing, it worked. Because the goal wasn't individual wealth, the goal was national survival. And nothing turbocharged this system quite like war. When the Korean War broke out in 1950, Japan's economy went into hyperdrive. American troops needed supplies, vehicles, steel, weapons, everything. And where did America turn? Japan. Their factories became the arsenal for the entire war effort. Billions of dollars in American military contracts poured into Japan practically overnight. What was a crippled wartime economy suddenly found itself back in business. But this time, they weren't exporting conquest, they were exporting capitalism. Through the 1950s and 60s, Japan's growth was absolutely insane. Their GDP doubled every 7 years, wages rose, education rates soared, a middle class emerged from nothing. Televisions, cars, washing machines, these became common in Japanese households, symbols of success, proof that the system worked. And then in 1964, Japan unveiled something that shocked the world, the Shinkansen, the bullet train. It launched just in time for the Tokyo Olympics. And it wasn't just a train, it was a statement. Japan was no longer a defeated nation living in the past. Japan was the future. Sleek, fast, efficient, precise. Everything the bullet train represented was everything Japan had become. But there was something deeper happening here, something cultural that the West completely misunderstood. See, Western economies celebrated individual wealth, the self-made millionaire, the entrepreneur, the risk-taker who gets rich. Japan celebrated something totally different, collective achievement. There's a word in Japanese, wa. It means harmony, balance. This idea of harmony between the state, industry, and citizens created an economy that valued endurance over indulgence.
Profit wasn't a trophy you showed off, it was a responsibility you managed. While Wall Street obsessed over quarterly earnings reports, Japan's Keiretsu thought in decades. Companies reinvested profits instead of handing them to shareholders. Banks provided long-term credit instead of chasing quick returns. Workers accepted modest wages in exchange for stability and respect. This wasn't socialism, and it wasn't pure capitalism either. It was something in between. A hybrid system designed not to make individuals rich, but to make the nation strong. And the results? Absolutely undeniable. By the late 1970s, Japanese steel outcompeted American steel. Japanese cars outlasted American cars. Sony, Panasonic, and Toshiba completely redefined the global electronics industry. In 1985, Japan accounted for 15% of the entire world's GDP, more than any country except the United States. Productivity was through the roof. Unemployment was basically zero. The yen was strong. To the rest of the world, Japan looked absolutely unstoppable. Economists studied it, politicians praised it, business schools taught it. Japan had cracked the code. But here's the problem with building a perfect machine. Every system has a flaw, and Japan's flaw was too much success. The same coordination that built their wealth also built complacency. Bureaucrats and bankers became addicted to growth. They assumed it would never stop. Companies borrowed endlessly to expand. Real estate became collateral for everything. And slowly, quietly, speculation replaced actual production. By the 1980s, Japan's boom had turned into something dangerous, a bubble. Asset prices soared to completely absurd levels. The Nikkei stock index quadrupled between 1985 and 1989. Tokyo's land prices became so surreal that people genuinely believed the imperial palace grounds were worth more than the entire state of California. Let that sink in. One property, worth more than California. Ordinary citizens were speculating on real estate like Wall Street day traders. Banks were lending recklessly because they were absolutely convinced that land values would never ever fall. But they did. In 1989, the Bank of Japan finally raised interest rates to cool down inflation, and the bubble burst hard. Stocks collapsed, real estate prices plummeted, trillions of dollars in paper wealth just evaporated, gone. Overnight, the miracle became a cautionary tale. The 1990s became known as Japan's lost decade. Growth vanished, deflation set in, banks were drowning in bad loans, companies stopped hiring. An entire generation lost faith in the promise of endless progress. The same disciplined system that fueled Japan's rise now trapped them in stagnation. Lifetime employment made layoffs politically impossible. Bureaucratic systems slowed down desperately needed reforms. The culture that prized harmony over disruption simply couldn't adapt to a world that suddenly demanded flexibility. Japan had built a machine so perfect it couldn't evolve. But here's what most people get wrong about Japan's lost decades. They weren't a collapse. They were stability at high altitude. Think about it. While other economies boomed and crashed repeatedly, Japan maintained low inequality, world-class infrastructure, and incredible social cohesion. Japanese citizens remained among the healthiest, safest, and best-educated people on Earth. The miracle hadn't disappeared, it had just matured. But Japan's story offers a serious warning to modern economies chasing growth at any cost. The formula that once saved Japan, low interest rates, easy credit, coordinated investment, now looks eerily familiar, doesn't it? China borrowed the exact same model: state-guided capitalism, export dominance, infrastructure booms, and yes, real estate bubbles. Western governments have embraced low interest rates and debt-fueled stimulus as permanent policy. Japan's story shows us exactly what happens next when discipline turns into dependency. But there's an even deeper lesson here, a human one. Japan rebuilt itself not with money, but with mindset. They didn't sit around waiting for miracles, they built one, day by day, worker by worker, decision by decision. Their rise proved that prosperity can be manufactured with the right systems and enough discipline. But it also proved that even success must evolve or it will decay. The same precision that built Toyota and Sony also made Japan fragile when the world changed faster than their institutions could adapt. In the end, the Japanese economic miracle was never really about factories or exports. It was about philosophy. It asked a simple question that every nation should ask: what is the purpose of growth? For Japan, the answer was collective survival, building a society that refused to fall apart after total destruction. But survival, once you achieve it, demands evolution. You can't just stay the same. And that's the paradox of perfection, isn't it? The more precisely a system works, the less flexible it becomes. Japan's miracle was engineered, but even the best engineering has limits. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but the patterns, those absolutely repeat. And Japan's post-war transformation remains one of the clearest mirrors we have.
A mirror showing what nations can achieve when discipline replaces ideology, and what they risk when success becomes nothing more than habit. Right now, we're watching similar patterns unfold in China, in Western economies drowning in debt, in systems that mistake coordination for control and growth for progress. Japan's story isn't just history, it's a warning label for the present. So here's my question for you. Are we learning from Japan's mistakes, or are we repeating them? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If this gave you a new perspective on economics and history, smash that subscribe button, because history has the answers to today's problems. You just need to know where to look. I'm the Monetary Archaeologist, and I'll see you in the next one.